Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, Paul. Our guest today, Nico Morales, believes that goals are indeed important. However, Nico says if you begin your action with ideas about how to reach that destination or the goal, you might just be missing the real starting point. Nico is here to tell us all about the real starting point, your habits. Success comes only from the habits that you maintain that will lead you to success. What do those habits look like? With that, let's bring on our special guest, Nico Morales. Welcome to the next chapter with Charlie.
Hey, what's going on, Charlie? Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. I'm very much looking forward to it. I've looked at your website, your Facebook and Instagram, and watched you on YouTube, so I can't wait to have you as a guest on our show.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. I appreciate that interaction and engagement. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about habits and why you should set them and not goals.
Perfect. Yeah, I love that. That's almost counterintuitive in American strategy. Nico, you have a gripping story in which you have had to live what you are here to talk to us about. You have a story that began with destructive personal habits, to changing habits, to living a life of service to people in need of a leader like you. You refer to it as athlete turned addict turned author. Can you tell us just a bit about your story, Nico?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in lower middle class America. Both parents were in my home. Mom and dad were around doing their best that they knew how to do. Both my my father comes from an immigrant family. My mother comes from second generation immigrant family. So they believed in hard work. That's one of the things that they taught me. But I saw that that habit of hard work, didn't really get them too far. So I looked at other people's habits, and I noticed some habits that other people were doing that enticed me to get to the outcome that I thought I wanted at that time. And for me, one of the big things was independence. I wanted to have my own money, wanted to have my own places, wanted to have my own things. Because isn't that the American dream? Right. Have everything your own? Which led me down to a path that wasn't the best. I say athlete because I grew up wrestling. Ages 7 to 17, I wrestled, and I was pretty decent. Actually decent enough to get a full-ride scholarship to a D1 college.
Oh, did you really? That's very cool.
Yeah, I wasn't too bad on the wrestling mat. It was a great coping mechanism for some of the things that I experienced when I was a young adult, when I was a child. They call them clinically adverse childhood experiences, which, FYI, everybody goes through them because our expectations usually never meet our experience, and that's where adversity tends to come up. Yeah, I wrestled all throughout high school. I had earned a scholarship, but I never took it because I had a habit of going against authority. When people told me what to do, I hated it. Even to this day, I tell people, look, if you need the shirt that's on my back, ask me for it, and I'll give it to you. If you tell me, give you the shirt that's on my back, we are going to have issues. My brain just doesn't function that way.
Yeah, I get it. So what happens?
So I used to use substances to cope with all of my issues. That was one of my first habits. I started smoking cannabis when I was 14 years old.
Okay.
And I started selling cannabis when I was 15 years old, and progressed to pills, because we're talking early 2000s, so 2005, 2006, I was selling cannabis, I was selling pills, I was selling cocaine, all while wrestling during the school year. Those are my two things. I wrestled and I sold drugs. Not into the extreme amount, like I wasn't the biggest drug dealer out there, but I had enough.
You made spending money.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. Make some extra money to take girls out, to have fun with the homies, and for gas whenever I needed to.
So what made you decide that wasn't working?
There's a song by a wonderful artist named Biggie Smalls. And in the song, he talks about the 10 commandments. One of those commandments is never get high on your own supply. Made me decide that it wasn't working was that I got high on my own supply, and I really liked it.
Yeah.
So I'd rather get high on the stuff that I was supposed to be selling actually selling it. So that caused some problems. That caused some financial problems. That caused some social issues. And that's where I turned into a full-blown addict. By the time I was 18 years old, 19 years old, I was snorting probably about 360 milligrams of Oxycontin every day.
I don't know what that means. What is 360 milligrams? Is that, I'm not familiar with
Enough to kill a
Oxycontin.
horse.
What's that?
All right. Enough to kill a horse.
Okay.
Put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could get the Oxycontin in different variants of pills, just like you can get Tylenol in different variants of strengths. And the biggest variant out there was 80 milligrams in one pill of a specific opiate,
Okay.
Oxycontin. So I'd use about 4 to 6 of those every day.
Okay.
And then the pharmaceutical agencies and all the government agencies, they changed the way that they manufactured them. So you couldn't smoke them and you couldn't snort them anymore. And pretty much they fell off the market because their consumability was not as immediate as it used to be, which creates a vacuum inside of this market, the drug market, and that vacuum got filled with heroin.
Yeah.
Most other individuals, I turned to black tar heroin,
Yeah.
and the girl that I was seeing at the time, she's like, we're smoking it, we're wasting most of our money. Inject it, we'll probably get more bang for our buck. Okay.
Yeah.
Never injected anything, so teach me how to do this. We're sitting in my apartment one evening after I picked up probably about a quarter ounce of heroin that night.
Uh-huh.
I brought over a syringe, and I'd never seen a syringe other than for cousins who had diabetes.
Yeah.
Just down how we're going to do it. She taught me what we were going to do, and I was like, all right, why don't you go ahead and give me my first hit? I remember my left hand was sitting there on her leg, and she had wrapped around on my wrist so that my veins could pop.
Right.
And it was a fresh needle, so it didn't hurt when it was injected into my hand. And then she slowly pushed the liquid form that we had cooked up of heroin into my body. I'm not promoting the substance, but it was a solution, and it was the best solution that I could find because I had the most immediate high I'd ever had.
And the most unbelievable rush. There's
Nothing like it. Nothing can compare to it.
Yep.
The way that I can describe it to anybody who's never done it is it's like jumping in a pool of soft teddy bears. That's the best way I could describe it. Again, I'm not promoting it, but I just want to
Of course.
visual.
There's a reason people get strung out on it. If it was horrible to begin with, then you wouldn't do it. But it's like we said, the beginning, the high, the rush is unparalleled.
Absolutely. As we're sitting there on my couch and this high just hits me, she takes her hit, we call it slamming. Wake up a few hours later, we both crashed out on the couch. And I was like, let's do it again. And I was hooked.
Oh my!
Immediately,
goodness.
it was a immediate need that I just kept on filling. I sold what I needed to sell to take our money back, and then went out and got another one. And basically, I was getting high for free. I supported two people's drug habits, so it didn't last very long.
So let's fast forward and tell me what happened that you had. We addicts often talk about hitting bottom or coming to some kind of realization. What was it that caused you to say, ultimately, at the end of the day, I need to change my act. I need to change my habits?
The ultimate thing that made me change my habits was the return on investment. I've had a business mind since I was a kid. My dad used to put me to work cleaning yards for people, so I understood that if you could fulfill a need for others, you could earn some cash and fulfill a need of yours, right? Ever since I was 10 years old, I had been working under the table. 14 years old, I got my first job on a construction site, and I've been working since. And with that in mind, I was not seeing the return on the investment of time or the investment of money. Now, that was the...
So it's very logical then.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The other side of it was that I had seen enough people die around me from smaller amounts and less time for payment. Seeing people, not even drug addicts, people who were just using drugs for the first time, pass away. I had this idea that then people are dying and I haven't died. there's got to be some reason that I'm out here. There's got to be some reason that I'm existing in this ethos that we call Earth. So if there's a purpose for me to be here, then let me complete it, because ultimately I didn't want to be on planet Earth.
Did you feel like there was a purpose at that? Excuse me. Do you feel like there was a purpose at that time, or did you feel really purposeless at that time?
I felt purposeless, seeking a purpose.
Got it.
I knew that there had to be a purpose because I was still around after all of the activities that I had been involved in.
Okay. So what did your recovery process look like?
The technical term for it is called titrating.
Okay.
For me, I just figured I built myself up to a certain amount of use, should be able to walk myself down from a certain amount of use. So what I did was I did just enough to move the illness portions of it, the physical withdrawals, so I could make those bearable, and I would reduce the amount that I used. Just to give an example out there, you take one whole cookie, and instead of eating the whole cookie, you only eat 3/4 of the cookie. And instead of eating 3/4 of the cookie, you only eat half the cookie.
Yeah.
Instead of eating half the cookie, you progressively get down to where you don't need to eat the cookie at all.
Yeah, great analogy. Yeah, I love that. So you do that, and I've read now, then you made that recovery, and then you went on, and as you did the process, you received a college degree with honors. Tell me, how did you go from addict to college degree?
Oh, man. Great question. To go from addict to college degree was a journey, because I ended up getting a job at a cellular service provider in their call centers. I knew that if I wanted to do anything, let me say it this way. I had the mindset that if I wanted to progress in this organization, and I needed to get some additional schooling. Also, I figured if I got a free college degree offer for my wrestling skills, then I should at least be able to get that done. That was the fifth that I had left, dumped off of, was going to college. So I figured might as well start back there. And I found out that this work that I was doing allowed me to take advantage of a grant that paid for my full tuition.
Cool.
As long as it was within certain branches of or certain industries, then I could this grant, and as long as I made certain grades, and the grant would cover all my bills. Didn't have to pay anything out of pocket, didn't have to get reimbursed, didn't have to buy books. All I had to do was show up to class and make sure I passed the class. I think it was like 75%. Figured if you can get so dedicated to being high, you can dedicate yourself to doing school. So I began the journey of college education. Now, this was all prior to COVID. This was early 2018.
Okay.
So by this time, I'm in my late 20s. But school, the opportunity for school was online. And I knew that one of my root issues was being accepted. One of the problems with going to school, physically, the classroom, for me, that I get distracted by the relationships that I could build inside the classroom rather than the tasks of doing the work. Going to school online was a far better choice for me because there wasn't any relationship building per se in the classroom. It was get online, do your responses, you submit your work, and get offline. Learned that there are 4 big drivers for individuals.
What are those?
4 big drivers that I've found with individuals, and that's backed up by science. Dr. Morstan, who wrote the Wonder Woman book, also is the one who I learned this stuff from. The first one is that there are problem solvers who are driven by problems, and they love solving them. Downside to those individuals is that if there is not a problem, they will create a problem so that they can solve it.
Yeah, I know those. I know.
Yeah.
I live with one, and that one is me. Okay, cool. What's the next one?
Second one is individuals who are very influential and love relationship building. They're all about the people. Okay. And the issue with that is that if they don't get their validation or haven't learned how to validate themselves through a relationship with themselves, then they validate themselves with relationships to others. So they will do anything and everything to be included.
Okay.
That's one of my big issues.
Okay. And that's a big issue with you?
It's a big issue with me, yes, sir.
Okay.
I need relationships. Stuff like this, talking to people, I do it all day. I love it. However, I used to find myself in a place where I would do anything to be accepted.
Yeah.
And that is not a good place to be at.
Yeah. What's the third one?
Is individuals who love consistency. Stay consistent in their habits. They stay consistent in their behaviors. They stay consistent in their lifestyle. The problem is that because they like consistency, they are afraid of change, therefore will avoid change to an extent that can be detrimental to themselves, because as human beings, we are built to change.
Yeah,
So,
I'm with you, and I hope you're not one of those, because those remind me of very boring people. So what's number 4? Because we need to move. I want to get on to habits. So let's get ourselves there. But let's go. I want to know number 4.
Yeah, number 4 is the individuals who have to be right. They're very data and analytically driven. They love information, and so they have to be right. However, if they don't have the opportunity to be right, they'll fight tooth and nail to prove that their wrong statement is right.
Yes. Yeah, no wonder I like number 1. I'm gonna stay with problem solver.
Yeah, and quite honestly, we all have all 4 traits within us, and that's where the habits actually need to be aware. So perfect timing for this, because we all have a specific way that we like to function, a habit that we like to stay in. Right? So it may be like you just described. I like to stay in number 1, and I like to stay problem solving. That can create the habit of creating problems so that you could just solve them. And that's where you can self-awareness to build habits that are constructive to outcomes that you want is far more important than setting any type of outcome, which is the topic of our conversation.
Let's go into it. Let's go into that topic. I want to go into that topic, but I want to do it with a statement that I read and you and I talked about that I think is really a brilliant statement. And I was very attracted to this. You stated, I almost wanted to title the podcast this, and I changed it to Essential Habits, but don't start a new goal. And that's part of your philosophy. And I say, you don't do what? Now, that statement runs counter to what most of us are taught in the world of life as a business and the American goal. But you say that a new goal is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not the first thing. And I was really impressed with that. And tell me about how the new goal is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not the first thing we do. And the first thing we do, you go on.
Absolutely. I'd like to use another descriptive picture to drive home this point.
Okay.
Imagine a soccer field with soccer players on it. It's great for each team to have the outcome to score goals. But if somebody misses a goal, you think it's going to be the end of the world?
Not hardly.
They believe that they have another opportunity to hit that goal. However, those same soccer players have the habit of running, have the habit of footwork, have the habit of training as a team. What is the likelihood of achieving the outcome of scoring goals? Drops dramatically. So the habits that we put into place to get the outcome are far more important than the outcome itself. Using that same analogy, the outcome is to win the game, which means you need to score more goals than the other individual. People who have practiced more, people who have implemented the habits so that they are done with less effort and less energy, are the ones that usually score more goals.
You're describing my son as a professional athlete, and he would agree with you 100%.
It's the habits. It's the habits that got the outcome. And, for me as an athlete, a former wrestler, I practice way more on technique. I practice way more on taking a shot. Practiced the moves that I would do far more than I ever practiced on just holding somebody on their back to pin them.
Talk about habits. There's a story, I'd like to offer here that I think is really right in line with what you're saying. And do you remember John Wooden at UCLA, the basketball coach?
I can't say I do.
Okay, John Wooden is like the most famous college basketball coach ever. He had a decade where he had probably 7 or 8 championships, not NBA, but college championships, NCAA championships during that period. And he was known for, his discipline and his relationships. He was just obviously a tremendous coach. His first practice, they spent the entire practice him teaching the players how to tie their shoes. And he said, because if your shoes are not tied properly, and the pressure that, as you lace them and you tighten them in certain areas, that's what's going to get you to last 60 minutes on a basketball court. If your shoes are not tied properly, you won't last. And I just think that's a brilliant analogy of a habit, of what a habit is, the habit of tying your shoes right.
Oh, absolutely. That's a great analogy of a habit, because that's foundational right there. You can be the best basketball player out there, but if your shoes are killing you, then your feet's killing you.
Yep.
And if your feet are killing you, then guess what? Your mind goes to that pain point. No longer, hey, I need to dribble the ball. Hey, I need to remember the strategy that coach told me. Hey, I need to remember the plays. It's, hey, I need to get this pain away from me. For most people, their habits are their pain points. It's not the outcomes, it's their habits, and it's on a day-to-day basis. For individuals who are looking to make any type of change, and I'll even refer to the stages of change, since we're talking habits.
Sure.
There's a few stages of change that most individuals go through.
Okay.
This isn't just in recovery. This is also with life. One is pre-contemplation. You have no clue that there needs to be any type of change, right?
Okay.
The second one is contemplation. Contemplation is they're starting to think that there might need to be a change happening in their life. Third is preparation. It's where they start to prep the idea of, hey, what would change look like? What would I need to do in my life? What kind of changes would happen? What do I need to prepare for? The next one is action, where they actually take the action to make the change. It's where beginning of the year, everybody wants to just jump right into action without any type of preparation or contemplation about what they're doing. And when they just take action, not knowing anything, then the next stage of change is maintenance. And in the maintenance stage of change, the ultimate goal for that is to make the new behaviors, the new habits, effortless and as little energy as possible.
Yeah, and regular.
Regular, absolutely. Incorporated into your lifestyle.
What sorts of habits do you do on, I don't know, I have certain rituals, I don't know, that I do daily. I don't know how yours look, but what sorts of habits do you do on a daily basis that you're conscious of, that there's a conscious choice, you're doing this habit to become the kind of person that you want to be in order for you to be the kind of leader and influencer that you want to be?
Oh, man, that's a great question. And I think you answered the question within the question. Because the first portion of it is, what kind of human do you want to be? Right? That's where you have to start. So for me, the habits always start with, what type of human being do I want to be? We're not human doers, we're human beings. So you have to be something.
Yes.
And for me, I think about being the best individual that I can be, being the individual that I would look up to, being the individual that I would need in my life in order to change the path that I went down. I don't regret any of the path that I went down. I got many lessons from it, many life lessons.
Yep.
The reason why we're here today.
Yep.
What type of individual would I have needed in my life in order to avoid it? Of that pain.
So let's drill just a little bit deeper and tell me, what kind of habit would support the kind of person you want to be? What would be something that would be regular for you that supports the type of human being you want to be?
That's another great question. And for me, it started off with three things. Now, I was thinking about the habits changes that I need to make. The first one was that I would respect a human being who was connected to their creator. Okay. I say that broadly because we're in America. Everybody gets to choose their creator. Okay? That is a connection with Jesus. Okay. The second one is a person who is financially well off. Come from, like I said, lower middle class. To be someone who had more money than money, something that I will admire. Third was to be somebody who could support their family and have a positive, healthy relationship. Never seen a man that had all three of those put together. Growing up, that wasn't examples that I was around. People who had solid relationships with their God, people who had financially well off, financially free, they could do things with their time as they chose to, and somebody who still had a loving relationship with their family. So that was the person that I wanted to create, and I started to imagine the behaviors that person took. And for me, that first behavior had to align with the first goal. So if the first goal was to be in communication with my Creator, then how do I do that? Habit is then praying and reading the book that I believe He gave me to my life by. And so that's how I created the habits, right? That's where I started my habit with prayer and reading. It's the first habit that I implemented when I was making significant changes into being a new person.
And may I just say that I'm exactly on the same page. I do, since I'm retired and I have much more free time, in the morning I spend an hour reading and praying. That's part of my ritual every day, and meditating. So I agree that those are foundational for me, as they sound to be foundational with you as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that making that the first habit was how I built on. I wanted anything to grow, then that's what I knew needed to lay its foundation on.
Okay.
So that was the first habit. The second thing that I knew I needed to be was financially well off. Well, you can't be financially well off if you're not in a good, healthy state. If you're always thinking about your health and wellness, then you're not going to be able to focus on your money. So you have to take care of your body. You only get one of those bodies. I have some implanted parts into my bodies because I've made some decisions that caused some of my parts to decay and to be replaced. But
oh, really?
I got both my hips replaced because of the choices that I was making.
Okay.
So I value health because I value health, and I know that health brings wealth. I take care of my body. So after reading and praying, next thing I do is I work out. I exercise and I stretch this one body that I have.
Yeah, I've seen your photos. You've worked out well.
Thank you. And so that's something that's very important to me, because if my body is able to do the things that I need it to do, whether that's from implementation, having to pick things up and put them down, to thinking properly, then my body needs to be in a place that I can do that. So for me, that's one of the other habits that I built when I first started on this journey. After my spirit was right, then I got my body right, physically. The third component of every human being that I believe we have is a mental component. Not only do I just have the degrees of knowledge, but I also read on a consistent basis. Every day I read something to personally develop my mental and logical thinking, strategy, something in philosophy, something in random books that I just find that speak out to me. So let me read that because my brain needs to stay sharp. So those three habits alone are the ones that I started with.
That's amazing.
How I began to implement these daily habits, so that now it's just like tying a shoe. And now those three things need to happen regardless of what time I wake up at, regardless of what part of the country that I'm in, regardless of whether I'm speaking once or I'm speaking no times, whether I'm speaking 10 times or I'm speaking at a school or I'm speaking at a corporation. Those are the three things that I need to do. Be the human being that has a positive outlook on life, positive mental attitude.
That's powerful, man. You know what we're going to do? We're going to take a break. I love that. And then we're going to come back. And then the thing I want to do is have you give our listeners some ideas of habits they can use. They can mirror yours or take some of yours, but then there's some other questions I have. So that's where we're going to go. But before we do that, let's take a break. Hi there, this is Charlie Hedges, and you are listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and my very special guest, Nico Morales, who has gone from, we would call it from breadlines to headlines. He started well, fell down, found himself, developed habits that really help him, and has given us wisdom on the habits that he uses regularly. And what I want to do now is I want to take a look at Nico. I want to take a look at maybe some habits for our listeners. And you introduced this when we were talking earlier this week. You told me that a helpful place to begin your habits is to ask yourself a key question in life. And it's a very American question, but I think it's a really good question. And to ask it genuinely, are you happy? And if not, why? And what role does your everyday habits play in your happiness? So can you talk to me about that, happiness and habits?
Absolutely. So glad you jotted that down, because I just went through my mind. But happiness only comes from our habits. For instance, if you're not happy with the job that you have, what habits did you put in place to get into that job? What habits are you putting into place to get into a new job? If you're not happy with your financial status, what habits do you have with your money that you are happy with? What habits do you have with your money that you are unhappy with? And then just broadly, the third portion that I know most people struggle with is relationships. If you're unhappy with your relationships, then what habits are you in control of to contribute positively towards that relationship? Because happiness comes from our habit building. And I have been in some very dark, what people would call dark situations. I've been super happy. I've been sleeping in a building that only had electricity, no plumbing. I had to have a bag of food hung up on a rafter so that none of the little animals would be able to get into it. I'd buy enough food just for that day, and I'd cook off of a hot plate. I was happy as can be, because I knew my habits. We talked about them in the earlier section, were prayer, meditation, reading, physical workout, and mentally stimulating myself. So where other people would be like, how can you be happy in a building that's abandoned and has only electricity and only able to buy food for that day because you don't have a place to store it? Can you be happy there? Because the habits that I was instilling inside of myself made me the happiest. So whatever that dark place is for those individuals that are listening, thank you so much for listening to me and Charlie talk. What habits have you created that have now placed you exactly where you're at? Because the truth of the matter is, all of us are in a position today because of habits that we had yesterday, habits that we had last week, habits that we had last month, habits that we had last year, habits that we had 5 years ago. Because of those habits, if we don't check them, we don't assess, analyze them, adapt to our new circumstances, and overcome our new circumstances, we're never going to be happy. Because happiness comes from an individual internal state of mind. No, our Constitution here in America says the pursuit of happiness. I believe that is a internal pursuit that you need to chase, not an external pursuit.
There's a phrase that I use. I've talked about. I've talked about it on the show, and I've written about it quite a bit. But a phrase that I heard, gosh, now was 30 years ago, 35 years ago, and the speaker said, "You are who you have been becoming." And I just love that concept. You are who you have been becoming. So it was like you talking about the past. We can't change our past, but that past helped develop us into who we are now. And also the choices we make today, if that is true, if we are who we have been becoming, that means we will be tomorrow who we are today. So I have a choice every day to, in your language, to create or exercise a habit today that will go on into the future. What do you think about those thoughts?
I think that's a beautiful statement there, because you're exactly who you are becoming. Even just a reflection of my past, became a wrestler because of the habits that I had for wrestling season. I became a quote-unquote great user of drugs because of the habits that I had created. So I became exactly what it was. And now, looking forward, I believe that I'm going to become a great speaker, a great influence in our communities, the ones that I serve at least, because of the habits that I have now. I've eliminated all the vices, minus soda here, some sugar there, candy here and there.
Man, I'm telling you, if that is all the bad habits you have, you do not have bad habits. We could list my bad habits, that only we'd have to do it in private. I'm not going to do it on air.
Because of those habits, right, then the person that I'm becoming is going to have the ability, I should say, the opportunity arises, take full advantage of whatever that opportunity is. So absolutely, I believe that who you are cultivating and creating today is going to be the individual that you will become tomorrow and next year. So if you were to think as that individual right now, would you be proud or disappointed in the decisions that you make within your health, in your relationships, within your career choices, within the way that you conduct yourself? Because you could have everything stripped away from you, and if you are not happy with who you are character-wise, you are value system-wise, you are morally, then regardless of whatever it is that you define success as externally, you will never be happy.
I've got a question. It's not on my notes. It's not listed, but it just came about by listening to you. Tell me the relationship, or maybe don't even tell me the relationship. Just tell me, you sound like a very confident young man, and I'm 75, so believe me, you're a young man. You're still just coming out of the kid phase to an old man like me. But you have a tremendous amount of confidence. What has given you that kind of confidence? Why you believe you're going to be something and do something. What gives you the confidence that you can do that?
Oh, man, it's like you're setting me up for all the alley-oops that I need there, Charlie. It's the habits. The habits that I have put into place, I get my value from, get my worth from. That's where I build my identity, is from the habits that I have cultivated on my own, in the dark, without anybody watching me. I know that if somebody were to come and just spring up on me, there's an opportunity. How are you going to handle it? I'll be able to handle it well because of the habits that I have implemented. So regardless of whether I am stripped again from all of my current finances, whether I am blessed abundantly with finances, I'm still going to have the same habits. And that's where my confidence comes from, if we're talking me.
Yeah, we are talking you. Yeah.
The other side of it is a spiritual confidence. I personally believe what Bob Proctor says. There are spiritual beings living in a physical body with mental faculties. So for me, my spirit is connected to one source spirit that I believe we all have connection to. So when I speak and when I talk about things that I know for a fact, whether we're talking theologically religious or we're talking non-theological, you want to talk laws of the universe, all line up the same.
They do.
So however you want to describe them, I'm very confident that as long as I live within those parameters, those laws, I'm good to go. It doesn't have to be confidence that comes from a beautiful wife. It doesn't have to be confidence that comes from 16-inch arms. It doesn't have to be confidence that comes from the next nicest car with the next nicest house and the next man-made built island. Confidence comes from, I have a relationship with my Creator, and as long as I listen to that voice that's in my head, I know I'm going to be headed down the right path, so that these opportunities that are eventually going to come my way will fall in my favor.
So let's look at this. I am thinking about your company that you founded. I love the title of No Halo, and I want you to explain that. But it's a company about personal and professional development, and you offer services that help people. Tell me, we'll talk about your services, but tell me, what is the objective? What do you hope to do with No Halo?
Goal with No Halo is to make everybody that thinks they were created, needed to be perfect in order to have things, understand that you're not created and you don't need to be perfect, but you do need to do better today than you did yesterday. That's the main driving point. That's the main mission behind my company, is to break down that idea, that facade that says perfection is required in order to have perfect life. Not the case.
Yeah.
I grew up in a background that perfection was demanded in order to have a perfect life.
Oh.
And not the case. I've learned that you don't have to have a perfect life. But you do have the one requirement. It's to do better today than you did yesterday.
I like that. I study theology quite a bit, and I've done a deep dive into what I call the late medieval Christian mystics. And there's a theologian from the 1200s named Bonaventure. And he's one of my all-time favorite theologians. He was so brilliant at a very critical time in history. And Bonaventure writes that we are not created perfect. We are all created with potential. And that God created us with potential, and we live into it with the hand of God. We live into that potential and growing into that potential. And that gives us lots of opportunity, as you and I have talked about, becoming. But that is the way we were created. We're created to fulfill a potential, and we have choice into how we fill that potential and what that potential ultimately arrives at. Bonaventure impacts me a lot, but that sounds a lot of what you're saying in No Halo, is that we're not perfect, but we do have potential, and we need to live into that potential and build into it on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that phrase. I've never heard of Bonaventure, so thank you. I just took a note of his name so I could take a look into this.
Yeah, I'll give you a book after we're done with the show. I'll give you a book, tell you a book that's really helpful to read. It's a very short book, but it's really helpful.
Awesome. With that idea, here's the way that I look at it. The idea is that we all have been gifted certain talents, certain gifts, certain abilities. And the idea is that you need to be, I want to say it as gently as I can, but I also don't want to be gentle. You need to use all those gifts all the way. That is your requirement. So because I have a gift of communication, I need to use that gift of communication to impact the most people that I can in every way that I can. Because God gives me a fully functioning body, I need to maximize this fully functioning body to its maximum potential. Right? The shortest member of my family at 5'11". I got uncles who are 6'5", cousins who are 6'6". I need to maximize my body to the maximum that it can get naturally. That is what I try to drive home. There's a young man that I've been mentoring for the past 10 years. He gets to see the world in a very beautiful, dynamic way. Some people call him special needs. He always wants to reach a caliber that is a little bit further than his capacity. I have to keep on reminding him, hey, you need to get to your capacity max first, and then we can see what happens after that.
Great.
And that's what we need to do. We need to drive home whatever your capacity is. We need to max that out to its cap, and then we'll explore what else is out there. So, for instance, you got to train at one of the famous gyms here in Albuquerque. It's produced a few different world champions for UFC. He wants to train like them. I let him know your capacity for your body type is not, don't have the ability to do some of those moves that those guys are doing, just because he's an endo body, so he looks like a small brick. Okay. The guys that he wants to mimic are the lengthy guys who have long arms and long spines. I'm like, your body just can't do that. But do you know what else? Those arms can't get around your neck because you're so big and blocky. So there's benefits to it. You need to maximize and capitalize on those capacities, as Bonaventure would say, that potential, before we even explore anything else.
Yeah, I like that. So it's understand your gifts and honor those gifts as they are. And then if you can add to it, if you can expand upon it, great. But you've got to maximize the gift that you have right now, and then you can move on to another one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is the first and foremost thing. I personally believe that your habits will help you capitalize on that gift. For most people, we don't recognize our gifts. So that's where my services come into play, because I love to show people their gifts. I love to show people, you have a great inquisitive mind. So you've been able to ask some questions that have opened up some thoughts, even in my head, that can communicate in a different way, right? So that's you capitalizing on your talent, which allows me to capitalize on my talents. And that's how I feel the world needs to function.
We need to wrap up. And what I wanted to do, I have a feeling you've already done, but I'm going to ask you what may be a difficult question because you've already answered this question a half dozen times, if not more. But I'm thinking you as a very active sage, as a wise person to younger people and older people. What would you say would be the one thing you think our listeners need to know more than anything else?
Beautiful setup. That you were created for something specific in this world, and no one else can do it. Your contribution with that one specific thing will unlock major contributions going forward. Please, everything within your capacity to propel that potential the maximum that you can, because that is your duty as a human being.
That's beautiful, Nico Morales. Thank you so much. That is a beautiful way to close it out. Thank you for being on the show, man. I really appreciate it. You've been great.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me and allowing me access to your platform.
Okay, you bet. All right, I want to thank all our listeners for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.